Book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah, chapter number 13. We've got this lesson tonight and then one more, and we'll be finished with Nehemiah. So, Lord willing, then we'll take up the book of Joshua. We'll start looking at Joshua. Y'all need to be thinking about what we're going to do on Wednesday nights because we're down to the last 5 Psalms left in the book of Psalms. So we're on Psalm 146, I believe. And we got several more lessons, but you need to be thinking about what you want to study on Wednesday nights. Okay, so be thinking about that. Chapter number 13, and we're going to start tonight in verse 18. Nehemiah 13:18. Now, here we see the situation where they're having a whole lot of Sabbath violations. And what we mean by Sabbath violations is they were treating it just as another business day. They were buying, selling, carrying their burdens into the cities, and people were buying and selling and trading on the Sabbath day. The Jews had specific guidelines for what they were supposed to do on the Sabbath day. They were supposed to make all their preparations on the day before Sabbath, so that they would not be doing this buying and selling and trading and all this other stuff. They were supposed to have everything prepared the day before Sabbath. But here they go now, slipping back into old character. Okay, it's been 70 years and it hadn't got out of them yet, has it? Because here they go, starting to buy, sell, and trade on the Sabbath. So let's read that. So Nehemiah now, he confronts the nobles in verse number 17. I'll read that. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah. All right, what does it mean to contend with? Right, he confronted them, he made a complaint, and he wrestled with them. Not literally, but spiritually wrestled with them because they were doing wrong and sponsoring that wrong. Now, why would the nobles allow this to happen? Think about it. Right, money. Money was changing hands. Everybody was having business, and they were liking the booming business. But here now is Nehemiah. Now remember, Nehemiah is the governor. He has the authority to do what he's doing. He's the representative of the king there in Shushan of Persia. So here now he confronts these nobles, said, Then I contended with the nobles of Judah and said unto them, What evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Now he doesn't mince words with them, does he? He doesn't sugarcoat it. He says, this is an evil thing you're doing. Why are you doing this on the Sabbath day? So he confronts them with the problem directly. He doesn't send a letter or form a committee or anything like that. He confronts them face to face. He calls for them to assemble, and they have to come and assemble before him because he is the governor. They have to come. So here now they're before him, and he contends with them. Now see, he says, you're profaning the Sabbath. Now look at verse 18. He says, Did not your fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. He's like saying, boy, this is deja vu, isn't it? This is deja vu. The same thing happened in our history 70 years ago. They were violating the Sabbath. They were profaning the Sabbath. And here now you're taking up the old reins and starting all over again. And you're going to incur the wrath of God if this doesn't stop. So he's not mincing words here, is he? He's not being a politician. He's telling it like it is. Now, honesty is always the best way to present something, but you have to be careful. You have to do it right. You have to do it in love, but he's being firm and stern with them about them encouraging the nobles encouraged these traders to come in and do this business. Now think about this. Here they are now. The Sabbath is going on. They're profaning it, and they're breaking the Sabbath by doing all this business. Nehemiah confronts them and says, hey, this guy, stop. Remember what happened to us 70 years ago? The same thing's going to happen again. God will cause evil to come upon us, and we'll be shipped off somewhere else if you don't get this straightened out right now. So look at verse 19. Then he takes up matters and he helps it along a little bit. Look what he does in verse 19. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gate should be shut. All right? So he's figured out a way to stop this. What's he saying? Right. Sunset, the day before Sabbath, sunset, they would shut the gates and not open them again until the Sabbath was over. In other words, he's locking up the city. Now, what's that do for the merchants? Right, they're locked out. I commanded the gates should be shut and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath. Now, notice what else he does here. He's kind of wise. And some of my servants set I at the gates. So, just in case there was a little graft or corruption going on where they would bribe the gatekeeper and he'd let them in, he said, no, I'm going to put one of my servants at each gate to make sure this order is carried out. And it was. His servants made sure of that. Because they knew that he was serious. They knew that he was intentionally stopping this sin, this evil. And he knew that if he didn't, judgment would come upon the city again. All that work that they had done on those walls would be torn down again. All the buildings that they had rebuilt would be torn down again. They'd be right back where they started, only worse. There would be slaves again in the land where they used to be. There would be slaves carried off into different places, and they didn't need that. All they had to do was obey God. So he confronts them. He says, okay, I'm going to shut the gates on Sabbath, the night before Sabbath at dark. They're not going to open up again until Sabbath is over. And now notice what else he does. It says, I set I at the gates that there should no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. So if the doors or the gates closed, what can you get in there? Just yourself. Okay? But you couldn't carry no burden. You couldn't carry no burden in. They would just have one of those doors that would open on the gate, and you could walk in, but you couldn't carry anything in. So they were making sure that Nehemiah's order was carried out. Now watch how determined these merchants are. Look at the next verse. Verse 20. So the merchants and the sellers of all kind of ware lodged where? And it says once or twice, doesn't it? In other words, they were hanging outside the gate, waiting for that gate to open. And they said, well, maybe somebody will come out and we'll sell them something. So they not only did it on one Sabbath, they did it on the next Sabbath. So a whole week's worth of time, they camped out on the Sabbath day saying, well, we're going to make some business. If he slips up, we'll be ready. If he gets slack, we'll be ready. Now look how Nehemiah takes it in hand, and look what he does. It says, verse 21, Then I testified against them, and said unto them, Why lodge ye about the wall? Now what's he saying? Yeah, why you fellers camping out here? I told you you're not coming in on the Sabbath. Why are you doing that? So he testified against them. In other words, he called out to them and charged them, said, look, you're breaking the Sabbath. You're not going to sell your wares on the Sabbath day. You might as well leave instead of holding up here and camping out against the wall. Now look how he does it. And he says, Why lodge you about the wall? Look here. If ye do so again, what's he going to do? What's that mean? Right. He's going to grab hold of them and no doubt put them in some type of jail. From that time forth, came they no more on the Sabbath. So he took matters in hand, didn't he? He was stern, he was firm, and he was warning them that if they didn't cease, he's going to grab hold of them. Now, these merchants understood what he was saying, because what happened? They left. They weren't going to get put in jail and lose all their merchandise and all their money and get put in jail and no doubt beaten or whatever. So they said, hey, he's serious, we best go. So after the second time, gone. Solution accomplished. Sometimes it takes sternness and firmness to get the matter resolved. Now the nobles on the inside were encouraging it. They were making the profit. They had no doubt had a system where they would engage in those and have a certain place where those merchants would be, and they would get a cut of whatever they made that day. I don't have any doubt about that. Remember, they used to sell spaces in the temple. They used to rent booths in the temple and make money off of them vendors selling and exchanging money there inside the temple. And remember what Jesus did? What did he do? He took matters in hand, didn't he? He made them a scourge of the cords that they had dropped from the animals, where they were leading them, and they'd been sacrificed. He picked up a bunch of those cords and made a scourge, and boy, he flung them out of there, didn't he? He ran them off. Okay, the same thing here. Nehemiah is taking matters in the hand, and he's ready to scourge them if they don't get, but they get. So the point that Nehemiah wants to make is, hey, this is what caused us to go down the wrong path the last time. It's only been 70 years, but do you want 70 more years of captivity? Do you want 70 more years of hard labor, intense labor? Do you want God's wrath to be poured out upon us? Or do you want to stop this and get it took care of? And I don't doubt that the nobles got a little bit ashamed. Now, these nobles ain't going to like this, are they? Man, he's cutting into their profit margin. He's cutting into their money. Well, what does the Word of God say? It says they weren't to buy, sell, or trade, or carry burdens on the Sabbath. So it was something that God had said and commanded, and they were to live by. See, that's the thing about God's commandments. You're to live by them. They're not optional. They're not encroachable. They're God's commandments. And when God says for us to do something, we're supposed to do it. And we're not supposed to fudge. We're not supposed to make gray areas. It's black and white. When God says it, he means it. So he commands that the Jews not work on the Sabbath, not carry burdens, not buy, sell, or trade. So Nehemiah cuts it off at the head and says, nope, that's it. You come back here, and I'm going to grab hold of you. Then the governor had the authority to throw them in jail. And he would have, and confiscated all their merchandise, and then what would have happened? Boy, it'd been tough then, huh? So he stopped it. He nipped it in the bud. And sometimes you have to just take and nip sin in the bud. You've got to stop it in order to get it to get back to where it's supposed to be. And that's like that root that we talk about in the New Testament, that root of bitterness. How do you get rid of a root of bitterness? You cut it. Okay? You deal with it, you cut it, and you dig it up and throw it out. You cut it, though, and that's the main thing. You have to stop it. We have to stop sin from encroaching into our Christian faith. So cut it off. Begin to live for God, live according to God's word, what God says, and you'll find you're going to be a lot more at peace. You're going to have a lot more success in your Christian life and ministry, and you will succeed in what God would have you to do by listening to what God says. His word is laid out for us. His word is authoritative. His word is inspired. His word is complete. His word is for us, Christians. If we'll live by the Bible, then we'll be well off when it comes time to go home. We'll be ready for it. But if we don't live by the Bible, what can we expect? The wrath of God. Punishment. And that's no place to be. Why would you want to be in the woodshed when you can be out playing and having a good time with the Lord? See the difference? The woodshed is where discipline is applied. And discipline is not fun, by the way. It's not fun on both ends. God doesn't want to whip us, but sometimes He has to whip us to get our attention. Why not cut that part out and say, okay, I'll do what God tells me to do. And then what happens? You're blessed. You're enjoying the peace and the comfort of God. You're enjoying God and the relationship you have with Him. And you're living for God and doing what God would have you to do. Now, that's not saying we're going to have a perfect life, that we're going to live perfectly every day, but we're striving to live right by God as much as humanly possible. So think about this. How do you deal with the problem? Look how Nehemiah deals with this spiritual problem. He dealt with it quickly, swiftly, and he stopped it. Now, that's going to cause some discontent with these nobles, and they're going to be complaining about him. They're going to call the king and say, oh, he's done this, this, and this. And the king will talk to Nehemiah and say, well, this is what I did, king. And the king will agree with what Nehemiah's done. He trusts Nehemiah. That's why Nehemiah is there. The king trusted Nehemiah. And Nehemiah didn't betray that trust. He did exactly what he was supposed to do, when he was supposed to do it, and he did it well. And he doesn't want this kind of thing to creep back in. And there's one more set of variables that are going to come in the next set of verses, the last verses here. There's one more problem that raises its ugly head. And he has to deal with it again. This is the second time that it's going to happen. So he has to deal with it a second time, and he does so. And then we see him close in the last part, the last three verses, we'll see him close and seeking God's counsel, God's guidance, and God's help, and God's remembrance in the last three verses there. So we'll look at that next time, Lord willing. We'll look at that, those last few words recorded by Nehemiah, and we're going to look at the problem that raises its head again, and then we're going to look at how Nehemiah solves that problem. So think about that this week. Think about living for God rather than living in the woodshed. It's better not to live in the woodshed, isn't it? It's better to live in your house and enjoy that relationship with God. Don't live in the woodshed where you have to be whooped all the time. Live in the mansion that you're entitled to live in. Think about that this evening. All right, we'll stop there.